It is that time of the year, so once again, I have a confession to make. Despite my being a fairly traditional person, at our wedding, I walked down the aisle to some very non-traditional music. Rebecca walked down the aisle to the very traditional Erev Shel Shoshanim. I walked down the aisle to the theme song from Game of Thrones. I watched that HBO show religiously, and I'm slowly making my way through George R.R. Martin's novels on which the series is based. Of all the disturbing aspects of that series, of which I can attest there are many, there is always one that stands out to me: the faceless men who hail from the house of black and white. These assassin monks are able to literally put on the face of another person, enabling them to find their way into otherwise impossible situations. They're able to take on the ultimate disguise by assuming the physical identity of another person. When they remove the face they are wearing, the scene is shocking and often disturbing. So why am I talking about a Game of Thrones and faceless men? No, this is not a sermon about politics and the election. This is a sermon about you, about your face, about your presence, and about why we need it. Faces and voices are, for others, the most recognizable markers of our identity. We're recognized by our face with its many unique and distinguishing features. We are recognized by our voice when we place a phone call, especially in the important days before caller ID, and yes, even I remember the days before caller ID. The faceless men of Game of Thrones are so disturbing to me because they disrupt our ability to trust the face and the voice of another. Seeing someone, hearing them, being in their presence are the ways in which we build our most intimate connections. The faceless men challenge the reliability of our senses and thus threaten our connections. Their presence is an existential crisis for our connections to one another. And that is precisely how I have felt about this pandemic. It has brought about a crisis in connections. And we as a community are obligated to do what we can to repair, to retain, and to strengthen these connections. For the past month, we've been reciting Psalm 27, the psalm for thy holiday season. Its sacred words take on a new meaning each year. So this year, I read and reread, Al taster panecha mimeni. Do not hide your face from me. Al taster panecha mimeni. We live in a time when our faces are hidden from one another, whether by our isolating at home or by our wearing masks in public. This temporary reality has forced us to hide our faces and often our presence from others. The Aramaic Targum, the translation of the Psalms, reads the verse in precisely this manner: Lo tisalech shechintach mini. Do not remove your divine presence from me. When the psalmist asks God not to hide God's face, what they really mean is, do not leave me. I need you here with me. I identify with the individual in this psalm. I also want to feel God's presence in my life. If the psalm were written today, perhaps the psalmist would have written the verse differently. Perhaps he would have said, God, I can't see you. You need to turn on your camera. I can't hear you. Are you on mute? We all yearn to feel the presence of God, and we all yearn to feel the presence of other human beings. This psalm gives voice to our longing to see one another again. Al taster panecha mimeni. Do not disengage from the world. Do not turn away when the world and your community need you most. We exclaim, I want to be present with you. I want to see you. I want to hear your voice. What we need most at this time is the presence of one another, the presence of our community members, the presence of friends, and the presence of family. Like the psalmist, I want to feel that I am not alone. I want to feel connected and engaged, both with the divine presence and with your presence. So participate, be present, and engage. Your presence is important because you matter on an individual level. You are important. Your presence or your absence impacts upon others. Judaism as a religion and as a people cries out and says, we need you. We need you because of our daily minyan. At B'nai Israel, we are committed to creating opportunities for our community members to daven, for our mourners to recite Kaddish, and once upon a time, for everyone to get a free breakfast on Wednesdays and Sundays. When the pandemic struck and we had to close our building, we made it a priority to figure out how to maintain the daily minyan. But without the ability to physically gather, how could we recite Kaddish? How could we offer an authentic service if we could not sit together in the same space? Rabbi Safra and I, and later the conservative movement overall, adopted a halakhic position that permitted us to gather a minyan over Zoom, because this was a sha'at dechak, a pressing hour. During crises and unexpected circumstances, Jewish law permits us to innovate and develop accommodations to fit those circumstances. You may convene a minyan over Zoom, but if and only if we could see 10 faces. It's not a perfect substitute, and that is the whole point of Sha'at Dechak. In unprecedented times, we innovate within the bounds of Jewish law, and we do so such that we can gather virtually to recite Kaddish and participate meaningfully in daily prayer. But we have to see the faces. More than once, I have led a minyan and I've had to ask, can someone else please turn on their camera? We need to see your faces. We need your presence. We need you to engage. Time and again, Judaism emphasizes the importance of engaging, showing up, and participating. When a new couple is married beneath the chuppah, we recite the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings. These blessings assert that God is the creator of the world and the greatest shadchan, the greatest matchmaker, bringing partners together with love and joy. This joy and love does not end when the band stops playing, because for a full week after the celebration, the newly married couple is blessed by family and friends with celebratory meals, and each meal creates an opportunity to celebrate the wedding yet again with the recitation of the Sheva Brachot. But there is a catch. We can only recite the 7 blessings at these special meals if there are panim chadashot, new faces. If everyone sitting around the table was already at the wedding, or they've already participated in one of the celebratory meals thereafter, then the blessings cannot be recited. There is a need for new faces, new people. The custom is constructed so as to create demand for new celebrants to participate, such that the joy of this newly married couple is not theirs alone, but it radiates out and it becomes the joy of others as well. Your presence enhances their celebration. You are needed. Do not hide your face. Which brings me to what I have missed most under these circumstances: being physically present with family, with friends, and with you. I miss our chats during Kiddush on Shabbat. I miss seeing you in the hallways after a program. I miss meeting with you in my office. I miss learning with you when the only thing in between us is a book, not a computer screen. I miss the connections. I miss the informality and the spontaneity of being in the physical presence of other human beings, especially those who I care about and those who care about me. The things that I love most about being a rabbi are not the things that I think I've been able to do well over the past few months. Oftentimes, I feel more like a producer or an actor than a rabbi. For the first time in my life, I have to think about camera angles and camera-friendly clothing. For months, Dweck Sanctuary right here felt more like a production studio than a Beit Knesset. For some time, only the clergy stood within its four walls, and only two of us at a time. We preached to empty pews. We davened with empty pews. At home, I have to think about my background. I sit in no fewer than 6 places in my house trying to figure out where I can have both the best background and the most productive place to actually work. And the one small measure of comfort through all of this is that I have been able to see your faces. Even here in the sanctuary, we had a screen, a monitor that sat right here in front of me with all of your faces, and that was the best we could do during the worst of the pandemic. Judaism yearns for communal engagement. There is an inherent desire to bring people together, to build connections, to share in each other's smachot, and to support each other in our times of distress. The way I see it, my nachas is yours, and your tzuris is mine. It's a package deal. We have always been, and we always will be in this together. It's a sacred partnership between clergy, staff, our community members, and the community at large. It's a sacred partnership in which each individual person matters, where your presence matters, and where I care deeply about whether you are meaningfully engaged. This is not a plea of desperation. It is a charge to all of you, a divine imperative. Just as the psalmist asks God that God not remove the divine presence from their midst, I ask that you not remove your presence from ours. At a time when we can all legitimately claim to have Zoom fatigue, at a time when we are all being deeply challenged by not only the circumstances of COVID-19, but also by the injustices and the civil unrest throughout our country, this is the time when we need your presence the most. This is the time when your participation matters the most. Let me be clear. I'm not just saying that you each matter because it is somehow what I'm expected to say. I'm serious. I truly mean it. When I say that each of you has an impact and that each person's participation is important, I mean it. A few years ago, Tal Kainan, the co-founder of a global asset management firm based in Tel Aviv and New York, wrote a book called God is in the Crowd. One of his main points is that the Jewish people have, can, and must work together to revitalize Judaism. It is as much about building bridges between Israel and the United States as it is about building bridges between each other. The key, he suggests, is the wisdom of crowds. According to this theory, which has been demonstrated by numerous behavioral experiments, the opinions of numerous individuals, when aggregated, is more accurate than the opinion of any one individual person. So Kainan tested the theory himself at an investment conference where he was presenting. He set up a table in the lobby where individuals were encouraged to estimate the number of gumballs in a jar. The average of all the responses, or what he would call the wisdom of the crowd, was estimated at just over 461 gumballs. The correct answer? 463. The closest individual guess? 467. The crowd beat the guesser. The wisdom of the crowd prevailed. In this model, all participants have a voice, and each voice truly makes a difference. Even if the difference is minor, it is still better than even the best individual voice on its own. And this is why we need to see your face, to feel your presence, to meaningfully engage you in our sacred work. I am committing to do my part, and I ask that you do yours. So participate, be present, make your voice heard. During these challenging times when partisanship is at its strongest and threatens to further divide us, consider what the world would be like if we could employ the wisdom of the crowd, if all voices mattered, and if all voices could truly be heard. Those who have remained quiet, step forward, show yourself, and speak. Those who have raised their voices in order to drown out others, step back, listen, continue to use your voice, but without dampening the sound of anyone else's. If we could only listen to one another and truly hear the voice of others, perhaps the world would be a better place, a place more unified, a place guided not by the wisdom of the loudest, not by the wisdom of the most powerful, but by the wisdom of the crowd. James Surowiecki of The New Yorker asserts that crowd wisdom works when the crowd has, quote, intellectual diversity, independence of contribution, and a mechanism for aggregation and reconciliation. This means that all voices must be heard, that all voices must be their own, and we must work together to find a way to properly interpret and synchronize all of these voices. Anyone who has sat through a large Zoom meeting where people are not on mute knows the enormity of a challenge like that, to synchronize the voices. But a difficult task is not an impossible one, and Judaism challenges us to take on even life's most difficult tasks. So let us begin by engaging, by showing our faces, by raising our voices, and by opening our ears. Let us see and hear the voices of those who are often marginalized and pushed aside. Let us see and hear the voices of those who work behind the scenes and are rarely in the limelight. Let us not take for granted those essential workers who keep our world going when it seems to be falling apart. The behind-the-scenes work that they do is not glamorous, but it is critically important and often underappreciated. So during this pandemic, when we know that so many critically important individuals showed up, medical professionals, facilities and maintenance staff, first responders, supermarket employees, all of these individuals showed up. They engaged. They made their voices heard and their faces seen, even from behind a mask. And they too deserve to have their voices heard. They count in the crowd. To them all, and to those who I have not mentioned, but I did not intentionally omit, we owe a debt of gratitude. Thank you for showing us your faces. Thank you for staying engaged. And thank you for speaking up. To all of you who have been with us during this journey, thank you. Thank you to my colleagues in the clergy, to our staff, to our lay leaders, to our committee chairs, to our volunteers, and to all of our community members. Each voice, each person, each face matters in our crowd. So stay engaged, get involved, and please show your face. Shana Tova.